This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hey, this is Erin with Cornell Studio Supply located in Dayton, Ohio, exclusive distributor of Jen Allen templates. We are a proud sponsor of this episode and the Brickyard Network. Find all your pottery and ceramic sculpture needs, including the largest stock of GR pottery forms at cornellstudiosupply.com. At Cornell Studio Supply, we are owned and operated for potters, by potters.
This episode is sponsored by Monkey Stuff. Monkey Stuff makes things for makers. We're inspired every day by the craft and creativity of makers and design and manufacture tools and accessories to try to make your making life a bit more delightful. Our products are designed in California, by makers and for makers, and manufactured in the USA. Check out our line of pottery accessories and tools at monkeystuff.com. Follow us on Instagram to see what we're up to in our studios, and keep on making great things.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 551 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I'm joined by Julie Wiggins, who carves crisp floral patterns into her forms that are then inlaid with cobalt pigment. We start our interview comparing the musical improvisation of the band Fish, who she has seen over 250 times since the mid-1990s, with structured play in the studio. We also discuss traveling for international residencies and what she's learned from first-person research, as well as the role she took on after Hurricane Helene, distributing aid and supplies to her mountain community in North Carolina. If you'd like to find out more, you can check her out on Instagram or visit juliewigginspottery.com. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Let's start talking about improvisational music, because both you and I are big fans of Fish, which is an improv band. But I want to talk kind of about the broader idea of how improvisation plays out in your studio practice. So can you talk about your love for music and then how that connects to studio?
So yes, you and I are both big Fish fans. I've been seeing them lovingly since the 1900s, I say. First show was 96 Charlotte, and I had just started school at ECU, and my mind was starting to expand and open, and I was a trained dancer, competitive dancer in my childhood. So rhythm and beats and music, it just resonates in my soul. Like I can't help but move when I feel the beat. And I've been able to see how I've translated the movement of my body to the dance of my hands now. And that commitment to that dance, that practice has really translated into my studio practice. It gives me a really strong discipline. But within that discipline, to stay playful. And that's where Fish just has had such an impact on me, not taking myself too serious. Like I said to you, like chasing that next note, chasing that next pot, like staying curious. How far can you expand the material? How far can you like push it to that evolutionary edge? And and when things go awry, like, well, let's try again. Because it's a constant study, where we haven't figured it all out. And I really see that in Fish, and I see how they keep coming back and they're never stale. They're so dedicated to their fan base and the people that support them that they're like honored to like come to that seat and play their best note. And that's how I feel about pots. Like I take that seat real serious, and I try to really stay in the place of making from a place of love and not lack. And when that happens, I pause, I take that beat and really try to recenter myself outside the studio because I know that's really where it is. And seeing that with Fish, at times they had to pause, because they weren't honoring the music, honoring the craft. And I've looked at that at times where I've had to pause, like having to pause because I moved here and I had to really take some time away from the studio practice to relocate. And that's just part of the artistic journey instead of thinking it has to be like this certain way. And then within working in pottery groups, I'm in 3 different pottery groups, like I mentioned, thrown together, Spruce Pine Potters Market and Potters of Madison County. And how do I show up to that seat? When people are going over new ideas or new ways of marketing, how do I say yes without saying no, but saying yes? And also, what can I add to that conversation instead of just like a yes person? Because then that means that everybody's voice is equally being seen and heard. And I see that in Fish. They all give each other the space and the grace to like dive into that note or that solo, but then also come in and support it with this beautiful medley or this beat. So for me, like they're just so similar in the way I'm thinking. And there's certain music, certain jams that I want to listen to when I'm in the studio. And then certain times where like I can't listen to Carini, like I need to stay focused and it takes you places. And then I'm not thinking about the work, I'm thinking about the beat and like where they're going next. But it also makes me laugh. I'm like, look at that.
And one of the common denominators in terms of the band's relationships with each other is I've heard them talk a lot about practice, that they, especially in the 90s, like when we first got into them, they were doing these long practice sessions where they would start on a melody. One person would match the other person's melody. And then when they all got there, they would switch the melody. So you had to listen enough, or they had to listen enough to catch what was happening. And then they had to respond. And I think in the studio, like the equivalent of melody in our lives is pattern. It's the material, like how is the clay responding? So can you talk about how you personally get yourself ready to both listen and respond? Because I think listening sometimes can feel passive, but it's actually a very active experience. And then how you turn that into a response.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that's it. I mean, just staying in a listening seat, listening to like starts with like, what is it I want to make? Like, who as a maker do I want to be? What objects do I want to put out in the world? What do I want to be responsible for? So I think, that starts there. And making from that joyous place, like I'm only going to make work that really makes my heart sing because then, the power of that is it goes out into the world, right? And other people feel that ripple effect. But knowing I'm working with porcelain, it's a very finicky clay body. And it's, and it also goes to like my yoga practice of talking about alignment and staying aligned with the material, with the practice, with the discipline, to not be scared to like fail, not be scared to like for me to push those pinch pots to their edge and they might collapse because it's porcelain, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't try it. It just allows me to expand on another possibility or another creative process that I might not have ventured in if I didn't kind of dip my toe in the water a bit of like, well, what does that look like? Go into like my wood firing, I'm learning a lot. I can't throw the pots. I can't throw electric pots like I do wood pots. So that's been humbling, like I throw pretty thin and now I'm having to beef those pots up. But those are the pots that always made my heart sing. You and I met at St. Croix, that whole region of like Warren McKenzie and that style of making and those pots, they really sing to me. So I feel like recently in the past 2 years, especially firing my wood kiln again, I'm really starting to combine a lot of my parts of like, okay, well, I know the material well, but what is it I want to do with the material? And being open to Grace when I'm firing that wood kiln, because she is humbling. I'm like, oh, I thought I knew something. Nope, here we go again. But I'm starting to make that wood kiln mine, and that's been really fun. I've inherited this beautiful Noborigama from Sean Ireland, and he fired it in this beautiful way, but that isn't necessarily my way. And Will Baker's been hugely instrumental in helping me find my voice and encouraging me to just kind of break down the parameters, or like the article that I read in Ceramics Monthly with that Rock Creek kiln back in maybe 1900s, early 2000s. I still have that original article, but that article doesn't necessarily fit my profile and like what I'm trying to do with the clay and the pots that I'm trying to make.
Oh, there's so many ideas I want to talk about.
No.
What we should back up farther. You grew up in North Carolina, went to school at Eastern Carolina. So you're familiar with the whole North Carolina clay scene, but for people that aren't, there's kind of the lowland clay scene, like kind of Seagrove down to the ocean. And then there's the mountain scene, which is Asheville up to Pinland and all of that area. So you, for years, spent a lot of time in Charlotte and had a whole career and a life there where you had a studio. And then you moved up to the Pinland area a couple years back. So can you talk about that decision to relocate as a fully formed artist?
Yeah, that was a big one, big time for me. I was in transition and wondering if I was going to stay in Charlotte or if I was going to relocate. And my first experience was at Penland in 1997. I took Dan Finnegan's Salt Fired class, and I had just been taking private lessons. I had taken a semester off from school to figure out really what I wanted to do. Started taking private lessons, and that, led me to coming to Pinland when I was 19. I'm like, what is this place? Who are these people? I've never been around makers, and I've never been around so many women artists. And I met Susie Lindsay and Kent McLaughlin, huge impact on my career, and just always kind of took me under their wing. That seed was planted so long ago, and I didn't know what it would grow into one day, but it always was in the back of my mind. Like, I wanted this kind of living. I grew up on the coast, loved growing up at the beach. But I also love these sweet mountains, and especially right here in like the craft area of the Appalachian Mountains, like the heritage, like you can feel it here. And I think, I'm sensitive to vibrations and energy. And I think I've always felt that. And it's my young artist mind. I didn't understand what that was. But I also was feeling rich community amongst artists. It's rare to have what we have here. So when I was in that transition, I was like, I need support. And Susie and Kent were really instrumental in having me look at the house. I knew Sean Ireland was selling his property, and he wanted it to go to another potter that would honor it and treat it the way that he and his partner had. And so it was kind of I looked at it. I'd been here before several times, off and on through the 27 years I've been coming to Penland. But I never thought I'd be the mom of it. And it was such a beautiful transition for both of us because they know me and I can call them and they can help me out with things. But I landed here at the base of Penland School of Craft. I have people that stop by all the time to purchase work. I have a showroom. And that's the other cool thing about living in this area is, we all kind of have a little showroom, and we also have an honor code system. And that was something early on. I was like, is this for real? Like you maybe see that at a produce stand here, every now and again. I would see that at the beach. But I just was blown away that it still exists. So, then it just became a no-brainer. Like, I already had roots here. I was really connected to a lot of the people that lived here. So it felt like a really beautiful transition and right where I was supposed to be. And then I realized this year with the storm, like, there was a bigger reason for me to move here other than just the support of being in the artist community. It was to show up for my artist community and my mountain family, because I've lived through hurricanes and I knew what to do and knew what we needed to do. And I was able to provide that in my driveway for like 6 weeks.
I wanted to think about community because we learn as humans to be in community. Like, we're born as a part of a family, but I found that my chosen family taught me how to be a little bit more of a community member than my own family. Even though I love my family, our community in my family's a little dysfunctional. But in the ceramic community, what I saw was give and take. In fact, I really learned that I went to Appalachian State and I came down to the Penland area and became friends with Mark Peters and Will Ruggles and Douglas Rankin. And they were the ones that taught me, like, what does it mean to need to run to someone's house to get silica? What does it mean to help someone fire a kiln? You know, like all these give and take relationships. So can you talk about prior to the storm, like what did community mean to you in terms of the way you interacted with the people around you that were artists?
So it was a lot of what you just said. It's helping each other fire kilns. If I'm short on a kiln shelf, or if I need a thermocouple, if I need help, I've been learning this new kiln. So I've had my first firing I did prior to the storm was an all-woman based wood firing. And I had Cynthia Bringle to, up and coming young 20-year-olds. And I was always trained by men firing these types of kilns early on. And it was such a moment for me to step back and be like, wow, look at how the community is shifting. It doesn't mean we're not excluding men. I love that my dear friend Kurt Anderson said every time he drove by the house, his estrogen levels rose. It's so great. And that's like the lovingness of our community. My community also, we have a strong pup pack. So in the evenings, we walk our dogs up at Pinland. Most evenings, if you come here to take a class, you'll see me walking my pup, Leon Bridges, our Teresa Peach's Burmese Mountain Dogs, Kurt Anderson's, Irish Wolfhound, Cynthia, and we are just like this beautiful pack. So that's been really loving and fun to experience that, we're more than what we make. And we may be talking on our walks about, hey, what we'll shoot or problem solve this thing. We also are like deeply rooted in our animals bringing us together and making sure we get out of the studio. The other thing that I found really supportive is when we're in these crunches, my friends will make dinner and drop it off and I do it back. So back to this give and take and receiving, it's not just receiving of materials and what we need help with, like help. I have a bunch of friends that are going to help me split wood this weekend. It's not just that, it's like knowing when we kind of need an extra hand. And there's no other person that understands it than another artist that's beaten down a deadline. Cause it's like, don't take it personal. I mean, I love you. I want to spend as much time with you as possible, but we have deadlines and we're kind of crazy about them.
Can you talk about work-life balance? Like how you know when you need to rest?
Yes. When my head hits the pillow too fast, that's a big one. I know that I'm not firing off as quick as I need to in the studio. I'm slowing. My synapses is slower. Like I'm not able to move through the systems as quickly, and I'm getting irritated. I'm like, because I'm very passionate about making pots. And when I find my tank is low, it's because I haven't been filling it up enough. So I've traditionally always had a very strong yoga practice. And it's really taught me a lot about how to use my body in the studio. I mean, my tables, the way I sit at my wheel, the mats I use, everything in my studio is in the alignment. So I am not fatiguing my shoulders and my body. I throw with a mirror, so my shoulders are always on my back. So when my body's getting crunchy, I know that I'm working too hard and that I live in this beautiful area. I can go for a quick walk. I can go kayaking. I can go, get on the mat. But I have found that if I want to keep this up, that work-play ratio has to be balanced. And in the world where it's just getting more and more and more, I feel like that's the conversation I'm having with most of my friends these days is how are we really honoring our own constitution, our sweetest parts without, putting too much stress on the demand of the cycle of making.
And from a practical standpoint, one of the ways to create time for rest is to charge more for each pot so that you get sort of a bigger profit margin. So you have to make less pots. So can you contrast like yourself as a 20 something cranking out as many pots as you can to yourself now and being sort of mindful about your personal resources, but also your financial needs?
Yes. My gosh. Yeah. There's so many things I'd go back to say to past self, past Julie. Couple things. Like I was a strict thrower and then I was in a car accident that wrecked my wrist and I turned to hand building So I would have probably started hand building earlier because throwing is so hard on your body. And I'm not in competition with myself or anybody else. Like, I don't need to make that much. And you nailed it. It's like just working hard so that you can make something you really stand behind, so that you can charge the price that it's worth and you're worth. Right now, my clay body's gone up 50%. And my materials are vanishing. My wood floated away during the storm. I mean, everything is getting more difficult for me to make pots. And I had a really big conversation this summer about that when I was in Greece. I had time to really reflect on who is it I want to be moving forward in the studio, because the ratio has not been healthy. And especially after the storm, I've just been cranking pots. I was out of work for so long that I had to sit down and push out boards of pots, and it wasn't fun. I was like, this is not what I like, but I also know that I have a material I can make a living. And so, I had to pull back from the expectations I create in my own practice and like, hey, is that a true story, or is this just one you're making up? Those like thinking thoughts that start to rise up. So that's also part of it. Those thinking thoughts, keeping those damped down. You're like, nope, not today. Not today, friend.
That's the thing that I struggle with more and more is not necessarily the toll that throwing takes on my body. It does. I mean, I definitely work much slower than I used to, but it's the expectation of myself, because I find that like sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night with insomnia, literally thinking about what I need to do. And to me, that's when I know I'm out of balance. So how do you sort of negotiate with yourself, or how do you soften or have compassion, self-compassion?
Well, I practice, love and kindness toward myself. So that's been a big thing. In my 30s, just really getting more connected to my parts, my inner parts, and practicing more Mitri. It's a Buddhist philosophy, more love and kindness, so then I can put that out in the world. And I do that. I wake up in the middle of the night like you do, and I start thinking about the list or the things that I haven't done, and I catch it, and I'll like do a thing in my head of like, no, let's focus on what you have done today. And because then it just stops that racing anxiety. I'm a one-woman show, and I have some assistants that come in here and there, and I get some help along the way. But managing all these parts, it's very demanding on my whole body and the emotional toll it can take. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for everything, but I also know that I have a choice in how I want to react to that. How do I want to react to those thinking thoughts? How do I want to react to a kiln firing that doesn't go well? Putting that negative energy out in the world and into the work I'm trying to create is not serving anyone. So I really try to grab those thoughts. And I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of self-care work over the past 15 years, so that I can stay aligned with my body and my mind. But it's a constant job. It's work. It's not passive. I meditate a lot. I go to bed with a sleep app music. And when I find myself in those thinking thoughts in the middle of the night, I just push play again. And it's like, it's a Hertz 432 thing. And it just really helps calm my heartbeat and everything. And I stop thinking about those things. But I have tools in my tool belt that help me get through that. And especially traveling a lot, those things help me no matter where I am. When I play that music and I use like a weighted sleep mask, putting those things in place, they're small, but they're really big.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com. This episode is brought to you by Snow Farm, the New England Craft Program. Are you looking to take your ceramic skills to the next level? Check out the incredible 2 to 5 day workshop offerings at Snow Farm. or world-class ceramic artists lead hands-on immersive workshops in wheel throwing, hand building, surface design, and more. Whether you're just starting or refining your voice in clay, there's a workshop for you. Set in the stunning Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, this residential craft school is the perfect place to create, connect, and get inspired. To register for a workshop today, visit snowfarm.org. I thought this would be a good segue to talk about your travels. You've spent a lot of time in China and also just recently went to Greece. So can you talk about what you get from travel and what you learn from that?
It's taught me a lot of compassion. And I think for any of us that can get us outside of our zip code or a place we don't speak the language, go back to the listening. And to me, that's one of the sharpest tools I can continue to work on. And so it's listening to all the other things, not necessarily what people are saying, but it's the listening of body language, and how people are responding. Because culturally, we have so many different little things we do, like getting in a line at a store. They don't do that in China. If you're waiting to get in line, you're going to get pushed aside. They're like, what are you doing here? Like learning those little like nuances. I was, in my 20s when I went to China in 2005. It was a very different time then. We did not have, to get a little webcam on your computer was very expensive. So to even be able to interact at home, was a different time for me. Now traveling, I just returned from Greece, and a month prior I was teaching in Cortona, Italy. And to be able to still keep up with people and things, it makes it easier for me to do it. But the thing about traveling these places, it's taught me about history and appreciation of what other countries have gone through. So many ups and downs. Our country's so new. And I just can't get over when I travel to these sacred places, like going to see the terracotta soldiers. Like, it just takes my breath away, and it's humbling. It's like, wow, there's something bigger than me. And that's also what traveling has taught me: perspective, especially going back to when I have those negative thinking thoughts. I'm like, nah, my life's pretty good. It's like you dock these memories of joy. And when you're having these moments that are challenging, you pull them out, and you're like, you pull those cards out, and you're like, yeah, don't forget that. And so I really try to embed that into me when I'm having those experiences. But being able to study historical pots and looking at how people were using form, how they were decorating in response to what was growing around them or their everyday scenes. I mean, this is how we've learned about cultures and civilizations. I don't take that lightly. I think it's so cool. I'm like, what is that leaf you drew? It's because it was growing with what was around them. I mean, it's pretty basic and simple, where we make it too much. And I'm looking at those pots and how they used them in their homes or just as decorative, but what was happening in that time period? What were people eating? What kind of dishes were they choosing to drink from? And today, to live in a world where we can make anything, it's just really amazing. Like I can't, I smile talking about it. It's like, I can do anything I want. The material, is vast. To travel to all these different places and practice different clay bodies. And, in Italy, learning about maiolica, decorating on top of instead of in the clay like I do, that really stretches my brain and makes me think about decoration and pattern. And then just Greece itself. I mean, I don't know. I think I could speak more about the Greek culture and the way of life, and the way they appreciate all those objects. And I was in Skopelos, which is the most northern island in the Aegean Sea. And so you can only get there by ferry. There's really no consumerism. And I was just able to kind of tuck into pots. And for the first time in years, I was able to make without selling. And that was so free in my heart. And I wish for all of us we have that experience to truly and not have the responsibilities of home life or anything or like remnants of seeing the storm. Like I could be in this beautiful place and think about what it is I want to make, and nobody cares what I'm making. It's simple, but it was huge for me.
Well, I noticed that you're exploring, like I think of your work over the years as you're on a path, like there is a the work is connected. Like I can almost deduce your thoughts by looking at the work. It's linear. But in Scopolos, it seemed like forms were really different. Decoration was different. It had your preferences in it, but it was different, like different things. So can you talk about how you shifted your mind from linear thinking to circular or expansive thinking?
Yeah, I know. That's a good one. And I felt like everyone in our residency was doing that. And so collectively, I felt like it helped us all open our hearts and our creative selves more to see each of us trying new things and supporting each other's discovery in that. But I went there with an intent to not make what I make for a living, and to hopefully come home with some fresh ideas to, invigorate my work a bit. But I wanted to really work with angles. So I was studying the Etruscan pots in Italy and didn't really have the time to work through those. And, I'm more of a curvy, I'm a female. I, like curves and rounds, and I want you to hold it in this way. But I was really after these hard edges and pinching these pots. I've just started pinching in the past couple years, and I wanted to spend more time pinching and coiling than I did on the wheel. And just, what happens when I connect these seams, and then really trying to use the imagery around me that I was seeing as influence, but decorating on top of the clay, like we were saying, instead of in the clay. And that was one of the biggest things for me, and using color. And I have these moments of anxiety of like, oh, what's going to happen here? And I'm like, who freaking cares? And so there's that, like the mind thing I do of like, nobody cares, Julie. Just have fun, and it was fun to make some things and just crash them and be like, yeah, let it go. So I'm still on it. I'm making a lot of pots from that time, and I'm excited about sharing that with everyone this fall.
When you come back home from trips like that, like the trips I've had, it's sometimes hard to integrate those ideas into my studio practice when I get home. So how have you been able to bring that stuff back and put it back into the linear production of needing to make work to sell?
Well, I'm hoping that I'm shifting the amount of work I'm making this fall into really powerful pieces. I'll always keep making mugs and cups and, tableware things, but really getting after these like one of a kind pieces. So the pieces I made there, I brought home as many as I could, and I have them sitting in the studio with me as a reminder of like, don't forget what you just did there. And I got back and immediately started making. And I'm doing this exercise, a 10-minute pinch pot a day. So I'm trying to put new systems in place to help just what you were saying, how I bring it back into my practice. But I also think I was away from my studio practice long enough at home that I was ready. It gave me space to bring in new ideas. And I cleaned the studio really, really well before I left, because I knew I was coming home with new ideas that I wanted to give space to and not have these old cobwebs in the corner, So that was exciting to like open that door and be like, she is so clean and ready for me. And I'm working weeks out for my wood firing, so I have some time to explore. I'm making, but I'm exploring, and I'm not like pigeonholed into, like, well, you have to make X amount of this today or X amount of that. Like I'm really trying to be more kind about that. Like that list, it can be a friend or not, I mean, I have a making list, but I've really tried to step away from like, you have to throw 20 mug bodies today. Like, I don't want to be that hard on myself. I want to have room for that 10-minute pinch pot that I might like, or I might be like, let's think on that. Let's like do the and also going back to fish. How can I and also add to that without discarding it immediately and being like, no, that's not a good one. No, that could be a real winner, and there was this beautiful article Susie Lindsay wrote, and I think it was Studio Potter magazine, but it talks about the not yet pot. So I really hold that one in my heart, and I think about it that not all pots are developed yet. They're just not yet. But if you come back to them, especially going back to our old sketchbooks, they just weren't yet developed, but there's still seeds there that are waiting to sprout. So I really think about that. And having her around me here, like it's a constant reminder, of those philosophies.
Yeah, and God, her work has remained playful for so long. I mean, I think about the freshness of line. Well, for one, like the way she's hand building forms is really beautiful, but to be able to make lines that feel energetic but that don't feel stale is very hard. So, in your work, one of the ways you've been able to work with pattern is, as you mentioned, carving into the pots, doing like an inlay technique. But the act of carving is so specific to how hard the clay is, what clay it is there grog in the clay? There's like all these structures. But then when I think about hers, is like the brushwork is so beautiful and so immediate, which is something I've looked at her work over the years and really try to emulate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we all have. We all love those Susie Lindsay pots. I think too that when we see them and if we've met her, we see her in them. She's so playful. It makes sense that that's how she's approaching the pot. And also knowing like Kent made her brushes, and the connection of the two of them, it's just apparent and they're making. And so especially now that he's not with us, I think about that more than ever, that he's still so much a part of her practice, and it's really beautiful.
Well, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the storm, about the hurricane that came through. Can you talk about what flooding in the mountains was like? Because I think a lot of people at the time, I think, thought like, how does it flood in the mountains?
Yeah.
So can you talk about that?
I moved here thinking I was coming to like a peaceful, tranquil living. I was living in Charlotte for 20 years, which was great. But I was like, I'm going to just be I'm going to be a pioneer woman, a mountain live, chopping my own wood, have a wood stove, I don't have central AC, all those city mouse things don't exist. And then this hurricane came through. I filled up a few buckets of water. I was like, it'll be okay. My dad called me the night before. He was like, honey, it looks like it's going to be pretty nasty. I was like, oh, Dad, it's going to be all right. He's like, well, you know what to do. I'm like, I sure do. Thank goodness. Oh my gosh, I've never seen water like that. I live at the bottom of a holler, in between two hollers, and the amount of water coming down that mountain was terrifying. Here we reached feet of like 29 and 32 feet. So I live on a creek and it crested, and I have a building that sits on that corner and it flooded about 2 feet. One more hour, this whole property would have been in serious trouble. Penland Road that I live directly on was a river, and at the heat of the storm, trees were coming down. I could hear the wind. Again, growing up in hurricanes, I woke up. I was like, this is not good. I could see logs coming down Penland Road. That was just and front decks. Like off of people's houses, cars just going right by me. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely unbelievable to think that water hard. And it's unfortunate it happened in the middle of the night, into the early morning. So a lot of us weren't as aware of what was happening outside as far as visually seeing it. And the hollers all buckled, so people were trapped for weeks, for months. That was really hard to see. The culverts all were just mangled up, and that culverts and propane tanks were floating right in front of my face. So we're like, how are we going to get to these people? I mean, once the storm stopped midday Saturday, I walked as far as I could up both my hollers. Couldn't get very far, but I was just calling out to people, and I could see people trying to come down. So I immediately started cooking. I have a propane stove. So I just made a big pot of soup, and I served it in my driveway. Anybody who came by, I was just feeding people. Because mountain folks have never been through this. So the look of terror on their face, they're like, what just happened? I'm like, I know. It's really scary. Lines are down everywhere. People here too are so poor. We're the poorest county in the state. And they're, lovely mountain people. So they just don't have the means to rebuild or even to grasp what was happening. So we all lost power in this region for over 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And we started getting cold about 10 days in. And so I did this viral video about the generators. So I had wonderful contacts. My friends and family on the coast were here with a box truck on day 3. It took them 12 hours to get from the coast, which should have taken them 7. But they were determined to get up this mountain and get to me. And that first truckload had everything my haulers needed, from water to food to some camping showers. We had some generators, chainsaws. We had like the basic cleanup stuff. And then the trucks just kept coming, and people knew I was a distribution hub. So my space was set up before FEMA was here or the National Guard. And I put a sign on the corner of 226 and Penland Road, let people know, and they just started coming by. And then the artists that was what was beautiful. It's, we work by ourselves. And so we're artists, we're dedicated, we're hard workers. What are we going to do with our time? So everybody came together and they showed up here in my driveway, and we were bridging gaps with our mountain community. So, I had David Harper and Michael and Naomi, Will Baker, Cynthia Bringle, Edwina, the list goes on, of people here every day helping greet people that just lost everything and walking them through my property. Penland donated all their tables, and they fed all my volunteers that came up from the coast. They stayed here for over 2 weeks. They had planned to be here like 3 or 4 days, but they were like, we can't leave these people. They fell in love with us, and they knew how to cut trees down. So they helped get Cynthia cut out. They helped do a lot of stuff at Penland, Teresa Peach, Elizabeth Brim, like all the artists that are my neighbors here. They saved people hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because that's what's really unfortunate with a storm. My family lived through Florence. Highway robbery, people want to come in and help you rebuild, and which has been really sad. And we're trying to help those people fight back, to deal with those things. So, like I said, the driveway was like a place where people could come together and meet. And I had like this big dry erase board that I was able to just keep people updated, where I heard a gas station was open, or if somebody was looking for a family member, they would come write it on this board, or they leave a note for somebody else. And then an organization found out about what I was doing, and they donated solar panels and a Starlink. And I was able to provide internet to the haulers and the families and some of the Penland staff, because the road up to Penland School was so unstable. There was a time we couldn't get up there anymore, and we were able to use a fire road by another gentleman, but it was just a sketchy time. The road was like literally falling down the mountain. Very scary. And then Samaritan's Purse showed up in the driveway, and they were like, hey, are you Julie Wiggins? We hear you're the person to get things done. I'm like, well, I guess so. My dad was a high school principal and was on the school board forever and ran the shelters when we'd have hurricanes. And it's just, I have been taught community since that's all I know. Like, we show up for community, we're there for each other. And that was what I activated, and I was so happy to do it. I'm like, people were panicking. So it was like, I made a plan, and my artist friends helped me make that plan, and everybody kind of had a job. I mean, it was all of us working together to bring hope to our community. My wood kiln stored all the generators and chainsaws. My basement stored so much pet food. One of the buildings had all the food in it, and then we had tents out here with all like cleaning supplies. And it was just coming every day. It was really beautiful. The North Carolina Outdoor Center paired up with me, and they were helping ATV up the mountain, and they did wellness checks on everybody. So I was able to, make sure everybody up the hollers were okay. And we were just sending food up the mountain on those ATVs and finding out who needed CPAC, who needed insulin, who needed these certain things that they weren't able to get to, because those are the people that I got the generators to first. We didn't need people sleeping outside so they could breathe at night. So we got over like 400 generators to the community through private donations. A lot of ceramic guilds donated, and Samaritan's Purse. So I was coordinating with them, landing Chinooks up at the middle school. And it was the artist brigade that built those generators. And we'd pair up with another local person, and we would, going out into all these places where we were finding out people needed power. And that was so cool. The story of the storm is how we all came together. And now my holler families, they treat me like kin. They leave me eggs or honey. They'll just stop in and check on me. And they're like, "We're so sorry we didn't welcome you before this, but we clearly see that you care about us and you brought us all together." And I'm like, that's the story.
You mentioned that you felt like this was, I don't know how you phrased it, but like that you were meant to be there. Like you had the skills that the community needed at that time. But you also basically stopped making work for weeks and weeks and weeks so that you could give those skills to the community. How do you come back from that, I guess, is the question.
At that point, pots were not important. People lost everything. And I just felt, and I would say collectively, many of us have been feeling this. It was hard to get back to my studio practice, but I couldn't even think about it. I was like, people are freezing. People are hungry. They need housing. And I do have a lot of connections. I personally don't have the means to do these things, but I can make a phone call. I get, again, growing up in community and with people that care for each other. It was a lot of our coastal family that supported the mountains during that time. And I could get that support I needed. If I knew that, something was going on there was a specific need at a home or within a family, I was able to get that and make that happen just because of growing up in North Carolina and having all these connections. So in that moment, I was like, pots don't matter. My community needs me. And I realized, like I mentioned before, the mountain folk, they really keep to themselves. They're generational families. They've been living here since this area settled. So they're not welcoming to newcomers, but they needed my help. And they accepted it, which was really impressive. Grown, older men that they didn't know what to do with me. But now they'll do whatever I need, which is great. And I just felt that calling. I've always been one that served my community. I was always involved in student leadership programs. And I just really felt the call, and that I'd get back to making pots at some point. But also my clay distributor flooded. So I didn't have a clay body, that everything was just everything that was a constant in my life had just crumbled. So that paradigm was gone. And I also needed time to relook at that paradigm with a new lens, because that old one, it was just gone. And then when we had several Potter's Relief shows that popped up. And so that's when I was like, okay, I have to get back to making. I also have to pay bills. I have quite a bit of damage on the property that FEMA did not cover. So I'm just slowly ticking away at what the repairs look like. I have a home and I have a lot more than other people. So I just stay really gracious in my heart about that. Making is a privilege, I feel like, at this point, and I wanted to mention, I joined the events committee for downtown Spruce Pine. And so I'm being very active in the rebuild. And making contacts with people that I know can make big donations. And, and I think that'll keep serving my community in that way. They've asked me to run for office. I don't think that's really the seat I'm looking to be, but I'm glad that I can bring hope into my community when hope was just not on the table anymore.
Can you talk about the big sales that happened, like the relief sales you mentioned? Because that, in terms of the way outside people not in the community could support, buying work of the artists, that was something they could do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it just goes back to us continuing to talk about community and how community is so beautiful and is essential. Humans are meant for connection. We were so starved from the outside world for so many months that it was for many of us, the first time we had left the mountain. So in Charlotte, Vince Long and many other people in the Charlotte area helped organize this Potter's Relief show for us. And we had free booth it didn't cost us anything. It was partnered up with the Mint Museum's Potter's Market show that they do in September. And they were offered to host many of us. So we didn't have any expenses. I have never seen anything like this. And I've been to St. Croix. People were lined up, and there were several of us that sold out in 2 hours.
Wow.
Charlotte was where I started here. So for me, my Charlotte family came out, and I had a steady line of over 45 minutes, people just waiting to buy that pot. And I wish, I wish I had more. But what I did have, they showed up for, and they bought it. And every hug, that was what we all said too. Like, it wasn't just the financial part that really helped us. It was the collective, like, emotional, like, people really meant they were thinking of us. People meant it. I felt it with every hug, every smile. None of us left with a dry eye. We were like, this really happened. I've never been to a show where everybody had a good show, right? There's always the one or a couple, or it's just a bad show. Every person in there crushed it. And so, and they did a great job marketing it. I mean, it was incredible. And then Raleigh showed up, and they wanted to do a similar thing. One of the board members here at Penland met up with Nick Joerling, and who is the president of the Spruce Pine Potters Market. And he's like, how can we do this? Because originally that Charlotte show was supposed to be just an offshoot of the Spruce Pine Potters Market. But then it was like, not every Spruce Pine Potters Market member could do it. And so it was beautiful to be able to open it up to the potters in Madison County, or some of the Asheville potters, people that were affected, but weren't part of our market. So that's kind of how that had originated. And there were 33 booths. And so the same thing happened in Raleigh in April. Same thing. It was after so many days without power, or just, how am I going to figure out this clay body? How am I ever going to get food again? Like, it just meant everything, that people really were listening. And going back to the listening, people were listening and showing up in the ways that we really needed it. So, and it's continuing. We're still feeling, some opportunities like that from organizations.
Yeah. What do you need now in the community, or what does the community need now from people outside?
So, to keep buying our work, I know many of us took our online shops down. Like the Penland Post Office just opened this summer while I was gone. So, our ability to ship stuff has been really difficult. So the just functions are starting to come back for us here. So I think, if you can't come to one of our in-person events, being able to buy online, booking us for workshops. I think anytime you can invite us to get away from here is lovely. Our grocery store flooded, and there's no plans to rebuild it. So we still don't have a local grocery store. So we're in a food desert. So again, just basic functions, it's like tough. It's like, okay, today, it's usually a collective, again, going back to community. Who's going into Burnsville? Who's going into Asheville? And we just get a list from whoever needs what. And we just help each other in that way, take some of the pressure off. And then please come visit us. Like, the mountain is open. On August 30th, we have a Hellbender Festival that's going to be in downtown Spruce Pine that I'm helping organize. We're going to have a 19-year-old Hellbender on site.
Okay, tell me what a Hellbender is.
A Hellbender is a little salamander, and it's one of the oldest. It's an ancient little salamander, and they're endangered, and they're well known. They're North Carolina thing. So we're dedicated to bringing awareness to the Hellbender, and the habitat for the Hellbender has just been destroyed, pretty much with the storm. And they're just such an important species to the ecosystem. So we are going to reopen our downtown that weekend. That's going to be our launch. We're going to have live music and food and vendors, and we're going to have the zoo here and all kinds of interactive activities for all kinds of people, all ages. So just opportunities like that. Come and visit us. The Spruce Pine Potters Market is October, I think, 11th and 12th. So we will be having it this year. And if you're a collector, please come. and support us. So that's just our biggest thing. Please come see us.
To wrap up, can you leave your social media and website so people could get in touch if they want to talk about anything we talked about today?
If you want to reach out and talk about fish, always, please let me know. But if you want to talk about wood firing, like how to be involved in one of our the wood firings I have here, or if you're looking to come to the area to visit, you can always message me. So my website is juliewigginspottery.com, and my Instagram is juliewigginspottery as well. So it's pretty easy to find me, and I have beautiful gardens here. So coming to visit is also like visiting an enchanted fairy garden with my sweet dog, Leon Bridges. Again, another play on music,
Well, this has been great. Thanks so much. It was good to see you.
I know. It was really lovely. Thanks for the interview.
I'd like to thank Julie for coming on the show. After we turned off the mics, we ended up talking for another 10 or 15 minutes about all the things that we learned from selling pottery and other types of crafts in the parking lot at fish shows, which was a big part of my sort of teenage life as I was learning to be a potter. I went on tour with the band, and I was selling pottery beside people that were selling sweaters and crystals and all kinds of weird stuff. But I really did learn a lot about salesmanship, and Julie said the same. She learned how to talk to people in public, and it's just funny how these informal connections, these early experiences selling your work, really do inform your career from the rest of your life, even if it's outside of a rock band's concert. Before we go today, I wanted to thank today's sponsors. That's Monkey Stuff, the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art, Cornell Studio Supply, and Snow Farm. If you or your organization is interested in becoming a sponsor, you can get in touch at brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.